Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to the December edition of my 2017 One Month to a More Effective Compliance Program podcast series, where each month I take a deep dive into a specific part of a best practices compliance program. In the month of December, I'm taking a deep dive into better written standards, which form the very backbone of your compliance program. Written standards include codes of conduct, policies, and procedures, and we're going to be taking a very deep dive into the design of all of these, training, and revising and updating. We'll also take a look at the information communicated by the Department of Justice on what specific policies should be included in your best practices compliance program, including policies on gifts, travel, business entertainment, charitable donations, facilitation payments, third parties, and cybersecurity. We'll also take a look at certain enforcement actions and opinion releases to see what other information we can glean from these. My sponsor this month is my Doing Compliance Masterclass. We recently concluded the first masterclass in November 2017. I'm co-hosting this with Jonathan Marks at Markham LLC. We will be putting on a full series of classes in 2018. Check back for details. This month's podcast series will give you information which will allow you to set up the very foundation of your compliance program. My podcast series on 1 month to a more effective compliance program is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Day 8, Policies and Procedures. There are numerous reasons to put some serious work into your policies and procedures. They are certainly a first line of defense when the government comes knocking. The 2012 FCPA Guidance made clear that whether a company has policies and procedures that outline responsibilities for compliance within your company, proper internal controls, auditing practices, and documented policies, and set forth disciplinary procedures, will be considered by the Department of Justice and SEC. By using the word considered, it is clear that this means the regulators will take a strong view against a company that does not have well thought out and articulated policies, procedures, all of which, or both of which rather, are systematically reviewed and updated. Moreover, having policies written out and signed by employees provides what some consider the most vital layer of communication and acts as an internal control by this employee certification. Together with a signed acknowledgement, these documents can serve as evidentiary support if a future issue arises. In other words, the document mantra applies just as strongly to this area of anti-corruption compliance as any others. The specific policies and procedures required for a best practices compliance program are well known and long established. The 2012 guidance stated, among the risks that a company may need to address include the nature and extent of transactions with foreign governments, including the payments to foreign officials, use of third parties, gifts, travel, and entertainment expenses, charitable and political donations, and facilitating and expediting payments. Policies help form the basis of expectations in your company and expectation of conduct in your company. Procedures are the documents that help implement these standards of conduct. The role of compliance policies is to protect the company, their stakeholders, including employees, third parties, and others, despite an occasional lapse. A company's compliance policies provide a basic set of guidelines for employees and others to follow. Compliance policies should give general prescriptions and should be supplemented by more specific procedures. By establishing what is and what is not acceptable ethical and compliance standards, a company helps mitigate the risks posed by employees who are not always available, who might not always make the right choices. Compliance, or rather, the evaluation of corporate compliance programs builds upon these requirements articulated in the 2012 guidance. Under prong 4, policies and procedure, it states, has the company had policies and procedures that prohibited the misconduct? Has the company assessed whether these policies and procedures have been effectively implemented? How the functions that have had ownership of these policies and procedures been held accountable for their supervisory oversight? The evaluation goes on to ask both about accessibility and effectiveness of compliance policies and procedures, stating under the questions of accessibility, has the company communicated the policies and procedures relevant to the misconduct to relevant employees and third parties? Has the company evaluated the usefulness of these policies and procedures? Company policies do not guarantee that employees will always make the right decision. However, the effective implementation and enforcement of compliance policies demonstrate to the government that a company is operating professionally and ethically for the benefit of its stakeholders, its employees, and the community it serves. There are 5 general elements to a compliance policy. It should stake out the following: identify who the compliance policy applies to, set out what is the objective of the compliance policy, describe why the compliance policy is required, outline examples of both acceptable and unacceptable behavior under the compliance policy, and then finally, lay out the specific consequences for the failure to comply with the compliance policy. Under the evaluation of corporate compliance programs for compliance policies and procedures to be effective, they must be communicated throughout the workforce and relevant to the stakeholders, such as third-party business partners and other business venture partners. Compliance training is only one type of communication. I think that this is a key element for compliance practitioners because if you have a 30,000 plus worldwide workforce, simply the logistics of training can appear daunting. Small groups where detailed questions about policies can be raised and discussed can be a powerful teaching tool. Another technique can be the posting of FAQs in common areas and virtually throughout your organization. Also, having written compliance policies signed by employees provides what some consider the most vital layer of communication. And once again, a signed acknowledgement can serve as evidentiary support if a future issue arises. Never forget the example of the Morgan Stanley declination, where the recalcitrant employee involved annually signed such certifications. These certifications help Morgan Stanley walk away with a full declination. The 2012 FCPA Guidance ends its section on policies with the following. Regardless of the specific policies and procedures implemented, these standards should apply to personnel at all levels of the company. It is important that compliance policies and procedures are applied fairly and consistently throughout your organization. The Fair Process Doctrine demonstrates that if compliance policies and procedures are not applied consistently, there is a greater chance that an employee dismissed for breaching a policy could successfully claim he or she was unfairly terminated. This last point cannot be overemphasized. If an employee is going to be terminated for fudging their expense accounts in Brazil, you'd best make sure that the same conduct lands your top producer in the United States with the same quality of discipline. So what are today's 3 key takeaways? Well, number 1, your code of conduct, together with written compliance policies and procedures, actually form the backbone and spine of your compliance program going forward. Number 2, both the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission expect a well-thought-out and articulated set of compliance policies and procedures. And finally, number 3, never forget the Fair Process Doctrine holds in the applications of policies and procedures. It's not simply about corporate discipline or investigations. This is Tom Fox. I hope you have enjoyed Day 8 of 1 month to better written standards, and I hope you will join me tomorrow for Day 9. This is Tom Fox again. Thank you for listening to this episode of 1 month to better written standards in a compliance program. I hope you will join me tomorrow for another episode. If you have listened to this podcast on iTunes, I would ask that you would rate our podcast, as it would help in our rankings and also help get the word out about the only daily podcast which will give you a hint or tip to improve your compliance program. Also, if you have any questions, you can email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. This is Tom Fox. Thank you again for listening. I hope you'll join me tomorrow. My podcast series of 1 month to a better compliance program is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.